Hi everyone, it's Yvette Le Blowitz from SPAITGIRL.com and welcome to the SPAITGIRL podcast show. I'm super excited to be here with you today in this online audio and video space and with our very special guest, and that is Jody Day, who is the founder of Gateway Women, United by and Beyond Childlessness. She is also the author, and we will be talking more about her book today and also what inspired her to write Living the Life Unexpected. Jody, welcome to the Spirit Girl podcast show.
Thank you so much, Yvette. It's a thrill to be here.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on your book. That's incredible.
Thank you very much. It's now in its third edition, which is just remarkable.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, for all of our podcast listeners tuning in right around the world, can you tell them a little bit about yourself, your story, and then what inspired you to start Gateway Women and what it actually means and is?
Okay, well, I'll try and wrap that up quite quickly for you. So, Jody Day, founder of Gateway Women. It's Gateway Women's 10th anniversary year this year, which is extraordinary. So I am a psychotherapist, founder of Gateway Women, the author of Living the Life Unexpected. I'm a TEDx speaker, a World Childless Week Champion, a former founder and board member at Aging Without Children in the UK. And in Australia, I'm also proud to be a PLICA ambassador, which is an Australian organisation which stands for Perinatal Loss and Involuntary Childlessness Association. And I started Gateway Women in 2011 as a blog, typing into the void because I couldn't get anyone in my life, either professionally or personally, to listen to me around what I was experiencing, trying to come to terms with being childless when that absolutely hadn't been the plan. So I was 46 and very isolated in my childlessness. And I started writing a blog. The very next day, I got my first piece of PR, which was extraordinary. Within 6 weeks, I gave my first talk. Within 6 months, I was interviewed for a big British newspaper called The Guardian for an article which is still read now. It kind of went viral. And there we are. And here we are a decade later, and Gateway Women is kind of the best known organisation for childless women in the world. We have a global reach of 2 million and lots of members and followers in Australia. Hello.
Oh, wow, Jody. That is such an incredible, inspiring story. That is just so moving. So it started from basically blogging and just typing your thoughts and feelings and wanting to share your story of how you were feeling and what was happening in your life. And then from there, you just connected with other people. And then obviously your story got picked up and in The Guardian and went viral. And wow, that is just...
I thought, well, when I pressed publish on that first blog, I thought, well, if one person reads this and gets it, that would be great. And suddenly all of these comments start coming in from other bloggers and from women around the world. And I'm sitting at my desk with tears running down my face because there are comments like, how do you know the exact words that are in my head? And I thought I was the only person in the world thinking these things. And I was just crying because it still touches me now because I wasn't alone, and I really felt alone. Because although 1 in 4 women in my generation, it's 1 in 5 now, didn't have children at midlife, I didn't know anyone. I didn't know anyone in my circle of friends, amongst my colleagues, in the wider community, sort of in the media, who was childless when that hadn't been a plan. I knew a couple of child-free by choice women, and they were slightly more visible in the media and things, but someone who had wanted to be a mother and it hadn't worked out, there was such a huge silence around it. And my blog sort of broke that silence.
Wow. And when you talk about you wanted to be a mum, but it didn't go to plan, Can you share more about that? Because I'm sure there'll be so many listeners tuning in thinking, Jody, you're speaking to me, and I can resonate with that too. But that sounds like me, because so many women are either in their 30s freaking out or early 40s, and the biological clocks tick, 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 and this pressure is on to meet someone, to find the right one. And then, but can you share more about your story?
Sure. My story covers a lot of different sort of ways you can be childless in a strange way. So as I was growing up, I made a decision when I was quite young that I didn't want children. I had a pretty unhappy and turbulent childhood, and I was brought up by an unhappy young mother. So I think as very young, I kind of thought I wouldn't have children and family. I didn't really understand why, but I guess it was part of me that didn't want to replicate my own childhood. So then I accidentally got pregnant at 20, and I was terrified because I'd had this message from my family and from school that having children ruins your life. But actually that was all around teenage pregnancy and young pregnancy. But I had this terrifying message that once again, as the daughter of a young mum and the granddaughter of a young mum, I was going to repeat this pattern and I was never going to have the life I wanted. And so I had an abortion at 20 and sort of got on with things and still thought I wasn't as fixed then about the idea of not having children, but I knew it was definitely not then. And that's not a decision I regret. I wasn't ready to be a mum at 20. I wasn't. I think I would have done a really bad job, I'm afraid. I was still reeling from the wounds of my own childhood. I was emotionally quite immature and traumatized. So then I met the man who then became my husband. I met him when I was 22. We got married when I was 26. I said to him, I don't think I want to have children. He was like, okay. But at 29, we were, very much in love. And I realized that actually children wouldn't be my childhood. It would be our children. And so I said to him, actually, I think I do want kids. And he was like, okay. So these two incredibly important conversations, which, derail a lot of relationships, we were both, I think, quite immature. And so I started trying to conceive and nothing happened. So I thought, well, everything obviously works. Give it time. 4 years later, still nothing. So I had an operation, which was called a laparoscopy, where they send a camera in through your navel to have a look around. And the surgeon, as I came round, said to me, well, absolutely first-class uterus. Finest property I've seen all week. You lovely young people just go off and have more sex. That was it. That was all the fertility advice I got.
Oh my goodness, that was it.
At that point, I'd been trying to conceive, for 4 years. All of my hormones checked out, all of my husband's hormones checked out. There were no structural issues. We should have had better advice at that point, but we didn't. And we didn't know what we didn't know. So we carried on trying to conceive naturally. I went to see every alternative specialist under the sun. I might have well just sort of walked around London, sort of randomly stuffing money through people's doors if they said they had something that would help me get pregnant. I changed diets. I peed on every kind of stick. I had all of the timed sex. I did all of I call it baby mania. And those of your listeners who have had that experience or are living that experience now know that it can become a real rabbit hole you can go down of trying to get pregnant. And you can break the internet looking for advice as well. There's so much out there. The internet wasn't quite such a big deal at this point. That's how old I am. So as I move through my 30s, my marriage is going wrong. There is my infertility and then my then husband's sort of glamorous, artistic, kind of slightly out there tendencies tip over. The workaholism ticks over into alcoholism. The alcoholism ticks over into addiction. I have the matching set of codependency. We're both children from childhoods with substance abuse in the background. So we are playing out a very, very classic pattern. And so I arrive at 38, still not having had children. grieving and frantic, but not knowing that I was grieving. And I had a nervous breakdown / spiritual awakening, as Brene Brown would call it. Kind of propelled me out of my marriage. And there was a moment when I was lying in the bath, and my then husband said to me, maybe we should think about doing IVF. And I just had this moment when I thought, I can't bring children into this mess. And it was not long after that I had the nervous breakdown, because I think I allowed myself to know something that I didn't want to face, which was that I would be bringing a child into a different version of the chaos I'd grown up in, but another one of those. And that my then husband, darling man that he was, wasn't really strong enough or sorted enough to be a father, that I would be taking on a lot. I'd had 2 children effectively. So I left my marriage. We got divorced. I recovered from my breakdown. It was a huge deal for me. It was like I call it a Control-Alt-Delete on soul. It was like a complete reboot. And I find myself single, childless, dating with the brand new world of internet dating, age sort of 39 and 40. And I was out there looking for someone to meet someone and do IVF. That was my mission. and I wasn't secret about it either.
Yeah.
And I had 2 serious relationships post-divorce. One of them, the guy didn't want children. And the second one, unfortunately, turned out to have quite a serious personality disorder, which many of you listeners will know is narcissistic personality disorder. So incredibly charming and charismatic and lovely in so many ways, but a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde. So when that very turbulent relationship finally broke down, I was 44 and a half, and it was game over. I realized that if I did meet someone, I'd need to know them for at least a year before we could consider IVF. I'd be 45 and a half. Even my denial and fantasy world couldn't continue. And I was in no position, and I never really wanted to adopt. But as a single, childless, self-employed, broke person who didn't own her own home, I would not have been, who needed to work full time. I was in no position to consider adoption, or even doing it on your own, as people so casually throw at you as if it's, the easiest thing in the world. I mean, I used to say to people, if I said to you I was thinking of getting a dog, you'd say to me, who's going to look after it in the daytime? Yet you say to me, why don't you have a baby on your own? As if, it doesn't come with huge amounts of responsibility and a life that would make that possible. So that's my whole journey. There you are. And then I started grieving massively.
Wow, Jody, thank you for sharing that, because you made a decision. Obviously, the marriage wasn't going well, and bringing a child into that environment with the alcohol, the addiction, and unhealthy, and you didn't want to repeat. You wanted, if you were going to have children with someone, it was to be in a really healthy relationship, and where the father could be of great influence and a role model, and there. But yeah, wow, like obviously now, I mean, you're celebrating 10 years of Gateway Women, and to think if you didn't make that decision, we wouldn't be here today having this conversation. You would probably be very, very, from people I've spoken to who have had children in wrong marriages, not everyone, but some I've spoken to regret it. It's their greatest regret. And they're very unhappy. As much as they love the children, there is that part of them that wishes that they didn't make that decision. So it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because I remember growing up as a child and always seeing Oprah, and I knew that she didn't have kids. And I thought, wow, look at this woman on TV, and, you know, she doesn't have kids, and she's so powerful, and she's got this incredible career. And I used to think, oh, if she had kids, you know, she wouldn't be doing that, because the women at the time when I grew up who had children were staying at home. And, like, you know, it was very old school. So they were cooking, cleaning, and the father, as you know, the husband would go out and do the job. But that's completely changed now. Women who do have children go out and do the work. So they have to all work to live and survive. But bit like you, Jody, I kind of got to when I was 30 thinking, right, shit, you know, I've got to get married, I've got to have kids. Ooh, it's just this big panic. All my friends were getting married and having kids. And for unfortunately, that didn't work out either, because got married, and then 1 year into the marriage, when we were ready to have kids, at the time my then husband was diagnosed with a brain tumor. So it just didn't happen. He didn't want to bring a child into the world if he wasn't going to be there. He didn't believe it was right to bring a child into the world if the father wasn't going to be there. And plus, it would be too stressful. So it just didn't happen. And then, you know, you get down and you date. And so when that marriage fell apart, just for obvious reasons later on down the track, you date and you think, oh, this is going really well, this could go somewhere. And then there's 3 years gone, or 4 years, and then you try it again, and then it's gone. And bit like you get to that like 43 mark, and I'm thinking, it sort of hits you, you know, like a cement wall, like boom, shit, you know, I've missed the mark. And yeah, it's a terrible feeling, because like media, Jody, what I find is everything's really geared around motherhood, and being a mum is so hard, and I understand that. But and then what I find a lot of people say, well, you don't know because you're not a mother. Wait till you're a mother. And I'm like, oh, I can't really wait. Like, I'm 43 or something now, like it's gone. But there's this big consensus, if you're a mother and you're a woman, you know, you've arrived because you've had kids. So you're a woman, and, you know, and there's this motherhood club, and all the mums get together, and it's sort of, it kind of, so I just love what you've created, which I want to go on to now. Talk about gateway women, because there's so many women out there who haven't had a child, maybe because of relationship breakups or whatever, or maybe they just couldn't fall pregnant, because you were even trying to fall pregnant and you still couldn't. And many women are having miscarriages, and there's all different reasons. But talk more about now gateway women.
Yeah, gateway women. Well, first of all, I just wanted to speak to the numbers and around what you said around all of the reasons. I mean, 1 in 5 women on average in the developed world is reaching midlife, kind of 45, without children. 90% of those, 90, is not by choice. So there's often, because child-free by choice women often carry less shame and have had much more time to really think through their choices. They're often more comfortable talking and speaking about it in their private lives, in their social lives, on the media. So over the last few years, they've become more prominent, and that's great. But it does sometimes give the idea that there are perhaps more of them around than there are. So 90% of women without children didn't want them. Only 10% of women without children are 10% due to infertility. 80% are childless by circumstance. And you and I have touched on some of the circumstances in both of our stories. I talked about ambivalence. You know, then after my marriage, I was childless by circumstance. I couldn't, you know, first of all, I was childless by relationship. I met someone who didn't want to have children. Then I was in a relationship that wasn't right. And then I was single. And, you know, there are, and, you know, and within your marriage, there were complexities and layerings around that wasn't possible. there is an idea that childlessness, there's two ways into it, you know, didn't want, couldn't have. But actually, the doors that lead us into the room called childlessness, there are so many of them. And there's a section in my book called 50 Ways Not to Be a Mother. And that's also in the free chapter download that you can find on my website, so you can read that. So I just, you know, and I just want to say it's so diverse, the reasons that we come into childlessness. And I wish that that society was more aware of that, you know, because it just thinks it's kind of like this simple binary thing, and it's not. It's as complex as unique as each woman's experience, you know. And I think each woman's experience of motherhood is unique, and each woman's experience of childlessness is unique. And Gateway Women as an organization really tries to be diverse and open to all of those different ways that we can. So the Gateway Women community, which is our private online community, that started in 2012. I'm quite geeky, and I was at a family Christmas, and I was in the bedroom, quote unquote, working on my laptop to kind of get away from everything for a while. And Google Groups had just started, and I decided I'd try to create a Google community, which I did, which went absolutely ballistic very quickly. And then in 2019, we moved the community onto a platform called Mighty Networks, which gives us the capacity for loads and loads of different things. So now we have lots of different subgroups, including, you know, childless by relationship, but also subgroups for our lesbian, gay, and queer members. We have subgroups for women of color. We have subgroups for our single and childless members, because that has a different flavor of experience to it than the experience of being partnered and childless. We have women who were themselves adopted and now find themselves childless. We have childless Christians. We have a group for our Jewish childless members. We have a group for our Australian members. And we have almost weekly events going on in our community just for our members. We have fitness groups, meditation groups, singing groups, as well as kind of support groups. And we have our online meetups called Gateway Gatherings, including in Australia. And actually Australia is and New Zealand are the only countries in the world where our members are actually able to meet in person at the moment.
That's so sweet.
Meet online, but we had a big network of meetups in Australia that closed down in the pandemic, and I'm sure they will, you know, grow again as the world recovers from the pandemic.
That's amazing. And obviously, when everybody comes together, they can just talk about how they're feeling, their story. Other women and people can get it because they can resonate. They're in the same boat. I just love how you're bringing everyone together, because you experienced, going back to when you started your blog, feeling alone. So you've been able to leverage creating community and support and sisterhood, and that is just really beautiful, isn't it? Because that way, because I've discovered during the global pandemic, one thing that's come up is that there's been a lot of anxiety around women who don't have a partner,
Mm-hmm.
who are on their own with no children, so they're solo, and older women. So they're so stressed out, because if they get sick with COVID or lose their job, then what? So I've spoken to so many women, and I mean, I'm on my own, so I can truly resonate with what they're talking about. And many of them have been in circumstances like one woman lost her husband, to so many different variables. But have you found that as well, Jody? During COVID-19, there's been just extra stress and extra anxiety, especially for the women who are solo, 100% on their own.
Absolutely. I was solo myself for many years whilst I was grieving, and also as a single childless woman in my late 40s. You know, I didn't really want to get into another relationship, and to be frank, there weren't really a lot of opportunities coming my way. So, And so I had a long period of singleness, which was new for me. And it was the most profoundly creative and peaceful and powerful time of my adult life. And I owe a lot of who I am today. It was when I did my psychotherapy training. And a lot of what is in Gateway Women comes from that time. It was a powerful period of kind of consciousness raising for me to be a single, childless, middle-aged woman and to really understand how society viewed me because of that. So I'm in a partnership now, a very happy partnership, but I still very much bat for the singles team because I think it's a profoundly important part of this experience for women who are single and childless. Within the pandemic, certainly in Europe and America, some of them have had to experience very, very long periods of intense isolation. I know women who haven't touched another human being for 9 months. Women who live alone, who are now working from home, or if they're lucky enough to have work, and are absolutely working their arse off as well. Everyone I know who is lucky enough to still have a job in this pandemic is working harder than they've ever worked before. And there's also the issue, if you are grieving your childlessness and you're working online with your colleagues, you now have this window into their family life, if they have children, in a way you didn't before, which can be so painful. And a lot of what I've termed pronatalist privilege, which we can think of as parenting privilege, has been really ramped up during the pandemic because people understand the pressures that parents are facing in this pandemic if their children are home from school. But there hasn't been any corresponding increase in any way of understanding the extra emotional and logistical and financial weight on people who are single and childless at home, people who are alone, at home. And I think it has really shown me how harsh and how invisible the childless community, is treated by the status quo. The majority of people are parents, and they see quite, and this feels quite natural to them, that their needs and their outlook is the normal one. It's the dominant one. And everyone else just has to kind of fit around it. And this makes me mad as hell. Because this is a diversity issue. This is a fairness issue. With so many people, 1 in 5 women and 16% of women in Australia don't have children. It's like we are a massive part of the demographic and a very important one. We do the extra shifts at work. We pay taxes. We do more volunteering work and more political work and more local government work free than any other segment of the population, particularly single childless women. Bella De Paulo's work has shown that. We contribute to the schools, the hospitals, the roads, the infrastructure that families and communities depend upon. Yet when we have needs, particularly in later life, around housing and care, suddenly we're seen as a burden. But our entire lives, we've been supporting everyone else. And that makes me very cross as well, as you can see.
Well, and that's, I love your passion because this is really why I wanted you on the podcast show as well, because I'm speaking to a lot of women in London, as an example, who are in lockdown.
Yeah.
And it's so confronting for them. They're on their own. They don't have a partner. And the isolation is really, it's winter. They're isolated. They can't even have people over to socialize, or, they don't have a child coming in or the mother-in-law coming in and out, or, you know what I mean? Like that social interaction and stuff. So I do feel that has been completely missed in mainstream media, if you would call it, or just in general. I think there was a lot of push for the elderly. There's a lot of talk about how difficult mums have got it and got it homeschooling. But we really haven't touched on how difficult then women are who don't have children or don't have anyone to support them or anyone that they're even living with.
Yeah.
You know, we haven't really touched on that. It's a bit like it's sort of shoved under the carpet, you know, and pushed aside. It's just all focused on, from what I'm seeing in media, it's all focused on the mum at home, homeschooling.
Yeah.
And that's it. And that's it. And then every other woman, they haven't really captured in London that there are so many people on their own, not by choice. Like I know one woman, sadly, her partner ended his own life. So now her being on her own in a pandemic and stressed out about her job, like you said, they're working harder than ever. And yeah, so because I listen to a lot of people, which is, I think if you're open to listen to other people's stories, you can get more of an insight into what's really going on. So I love how you now, and that's why I really want to share Gateway Women, because people who are on their own, wherever they are in the world, can now connect with other women and not feel alone. And at least you've got that support, because yeah, they don't do a lot of talking about people living on their own, and whether that be a guy or a girl, regardless, people who live on their own during a pandemic, their isolation is really isolated, whether that's an older woman or it doesn't matter what age.
Yeah, I mean, it's, when you consider it, could be 20 to 25% of the mature population in the UK. The numbers for men are possibly slightly higher. We're also, as you say, not hearing anything about, you know, men without children, single men without children at home struggling. It's like they've been completely forgotten as well. And I just wanted to give a shout out to one of my World Childless Week Champion colleagues, Michael Hughes, who lives in Australia. And Michael has a website called Married and Childless, but he has one of the world's only support groups for childless men. And you can find it on Facebook, and it's called Band of Brothers. And he's a great guy to connect with. So if you're a childless man listening to this, or you know a childless man, send them to Band of Brothers. But back to Gateway Women and aging without children, I think also for some women who have perhaps been in denial about the challenges of living alone and aging, I think this pandemic and being so forced, you know, to spend so much time alone and realize how hard that is, because the things that they normally sustain them, their work, going to the gym, seeing friends, whatever it is. I mean, single women each know how to build a life, how to knit it together to get what they need that maybe their coupled friends get from their relationships, and they can have a great life. But when all of those things are stripped away and you're just at home on your own, I think it's a very sobering time to realize this is possibly what my old age could be like. And what are my options so that it's and you start to look around and it's like the options aren't that great.
Yes, I can.
Very scary.
I can resonate with that, because here's an example. So before, when I was able to travel all the time to the Maldives and Singapore and Hong Kong and anywhere around the world, I didn't really think about being childless or not having kids, or not, you know. But then when all of the travel and my travel shows stopped and I couldn't travel international and I went into lockdown and international travels completely stopped, I realized really travel was my baby. So whilst most people are at home looking after the kids and taking them to soccer and school, and that's their life, my life was like travel. And I've spoken to a number of women who don't have kids, and they were either wrapped up in their job and travel, and now that stopped, they're like, holy guacamole, you know, holy shit. Okay. And it sort of like once again hits you like a brick wall, where it's so confronting. And I've been going to the aged care home. Whoa, that's even more confronting. I'm really grateful I'm there with my mum, But then it's sort of, there's one lady there that doesn't have children and never had children, and everybody feels so sorry for her, and I feel really sorry for her. And then I'm like, oh, I feel so sorry for her. She's got no one to visit. And like my sister-in-law, sadly, she tried to have children and wasn't able to carry. She had up to 13 miscarriages trying her heart out and couldn't have it. But then it rears its ugly head, like things that I forgot about, you know, wanting to have kids, and then finding out my past husband then was diagnosed with the brain tumor with 4 months to live. It just sort of comes up thinking, shit, that didn't go to plan. That was the plan, to have the kids.
Yes.
And now, and then it all comes up. It all comes up. And whilst it's you got to process it, it's so confronting. And then here's the other thing, Jody. So many women complain, and I'm sure you, having done online dating, and other women can resonate, where they feel that this day and age, no one wants to make a commitment. You know, that people go on these apps, and most women are saying to me, when you're over 40 plus, you're used to living by yourself, you don't want anyone else in your space. So it's sort of really difficult to establish any great kind of relationship. But I've had a few dating experts on who think that's a lot of bollocks. But everyone's having a different experience with online dating. Good, bad, ugly, otherwise. I know you got to give it a try, but it's not like you can just find someone and meet someone and boom.
No, it's much more complex now in a way. And I have to say, when I turned 50, single, and I thought I'd made peace with my singleness. I thought, well, I know so many amazing single childless women in their 40s and 50s and 60s. I think the chances are that I will be remaining single myself, because I don't see any, possible relationship out there for me. I'm not closed to it, but statistically, it's pretty unlikely. So I thought, okay, well, this has got to be the best time ever in the history of Western civilization to be a single childless woman. I have many privileges. I do work that I love. I live in a city I love. It has got to be possible to make this life work. Yes, it's going to have challenges, but I set out with an attitude in my mind that I was going to make singleness work for me, rather than seeing it just like with not being a mother. I made peace with it, and I thought, this is not a second best life. This is a different life than the one I wanted and I hoped for, but it's not a lesser life. It's a different messy human experience, being childless, than motherhood. Motherhood would have been a messy human experience. And I thought, okay, with my singleness, that's got to be possible. So I really inhabited and owned and was proud of my single identity. I never completely sorted out holidays. That was the thing I was still working on. I was either too much on my own or too much with people who were driving me nuts. I never completely worked out an absolute perfect thing. I think kind of retreats worked out best, going on a writing retreat or going on a yoga retreat seemed to work best. But so when I met my partner, my life partner, I was 52, and I'm 56, nearly 57 now. There was a sense that we were both very much at peace, with our single status. He'd been out of a long-term relationship for a long time as well. And there was a real maturity, emotional maturity there, about what we would give up in order to be together and what we would gain from that. And I remember him saying to me, but you don't need me to kind of sort out your life. You don't need me to do this. You don't need me to do. He's like, well, what do you need me for? I don't need you in my life. I want you in my life.
Wow, that's beautiful.
I think, and he said that was about the most romantic thing, he'd ever heard. So for us, it's been very much, it's two lives coming together. I've given up my life in London. You know, I live in rural Ireland. You know, I live with my partner and his mum. She's live.
Beautiful.
You know, we all get on really well. There's, you know, lots of four-leggeds involved as well.
Oh, that's so lovely.
I think there was a sense of emotional maturity of what we were getting into that hopefully comes as you get a bit older, that made
Mm.
the bits of independence that we had to give up. We both understood it, and we both gave up some independence in order to create a new alliance.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Isn't that a lovely? I love how you say, you mentioned you didn't need him. You know what I mean? Like, that's
I
really
didn't need
lovely.
saving from my singleness.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I think because you're complete and you're whole within yourself. You obviously you've spent time on your own, you know yourself best, and you arrive. You know what's interesting, Jody? I always refer back to, for me, the only woman when I think of media, and I think of one woman who hasn't had a baby or a child, um, who is the most empowering woman, powerful woman, and she really has risen up to serve others, and we know it's Oprah. I kind of feel that you did a talk, which is on your website, about maybe not all of us will rise up to that, you know, celebrity status as such, as but in each way we will do something, I feel, of higher service, or, you know, our calling is of a higher service. But I'll tell you what, Jody, a lot of my friends who do have kids and who are married get really jealous when they see me over at the Maldives, or used to see me at the Maldives in the overwater villas and traveling around, and go, oh, I wish I was single and had no kids. And I think what you've said is embracing it, accepting it. Like, it just, there's this process, isn't it?
It doesn't
It's
come without, you know, the challenges are real. I mean, there
mm,
are, you know, the cognitive load of being single, you know, making every single decision yourself. I mean, I used to get to a point by the end of the day where I thought I couldn't even decide what to have for dinner. I was so over making decisions about everything. You know, not having someone to sort of share your triumphs with or your disasters with, holidays, you know, long weekends when you sometimes just suddenly you just spent a bit too much time by yourself. And also the way that society is structured, which is focused on the needs of family and couples, rather, you know, the single supplement that you have to pay. There's so, and the way the tax system and the housing system is set up. I mean, there are a lot of discriminations against single people, even though living solo and being single is the fastest growing demographic in the world. Yet still we're living in this antiquated societal structure. I mean, the amount of politicians that bang on about family friendly, this, that, and the other, and you just think, wake up, people. I mean, in the UK, there's like 20% of people who would love to vote for someone who thought about the needs of people rather than families.
I love that. Thought about the needs of people rather than families, because when I think of this, and it's always confronting, and through the pandemic even more so, when I go into that aged care, there are people dying on their own who have had no kids, and everybody knows who the person is who doesn't have kids. It's so confronting. And what I loved, I kept saying to my sister-in-law, oh, there needs to be some like group, which is Gateway Women, where like if you did go to the aged care and you're on your own, you could like reach out to someone else, sisterhood, you know, like there has to be a way. How can we support these people on their own? Like I just really started, it really got me thinking
Well,
about, like you say, people.
that sort of brings me into sort of the next 10 years of my work, I feel, which will be really about thinking about how does one become a conscious, childless elder woman in a society that has no positive words for older women other than grandmother. That is the only positive word. All of the other ones are insults. So how do we kind of inhabit that new identity, and how do we become elders? And one of, the elders also need youngers. We need people to mentor. We need people to pass our wisdom on to. And what I'm beginning to see in the Gateway Women online community, I have some members who've been with me for a decade, almost a decade. And, we're moving into our 50s. We have members in their 60s, and we have younger members joining. Most of our members who join us tend to be round about 39 to 44, that crunch period. But we do have some younger ones as well. And what I'd like to see over the next decade is really starting to invest in those intergenerational contacts. And when we can start meeting locally as well, really building up local networks again for Gateway Women, so that an older Gateway woman can be a mentor to a younger one. And then when she's older and needs someone to, fix her satellite box, get her car MOT'd and all of those things that help you, because there's a lot of focus on care. But actually, one of the things that really helps people to remain living independently as old as possible is having a younger advocate in their life. It's not just about care, it's about having a younger generation person who can help you deal with the complexity of modern living. And so I'm really hopeful that over the next 10 years and maybe the next 20 years, Gateway Women will become a network, as you say, of sisterhood and support across the generations.
I love that, across the generations. And I loved, you just touched on that, because I often think, oh, shit, if I was like 70 and at home, who could I ask about, this latest app? There's going to be so many technology changes. I will need a young whippersnipper to be of help. And then if you don't have your child, you're childless and you don't have a husband or whatever, and you're on your own, like, I just think that is so incredible, because that support and it's just lovely what you're like, the vision of growing it. And I love the idea of local, because you're so right. And the more everybody can stay in their own home, that's the ideal scenario, because I hate to break it to everyone, but aged care facilities, no discredit to the nurses and the workers, but they suck. There's just not enough nurses and not enough carers. And I know everybody, if they could stay at home, would love to.
I think a lot of single childless women actually are looking into living communally. Certainly in the UK, there's a big UK co-housing network. One of our Gateway Women members is very interested in setting up a UK Gateway Women co-housing community. And that's something you have to get involved in thinking about perhaps a little bit younger than you're ready to, because it can take a long time to get those things set up. You don't want to sort of at 70 think I need to be in community, because it's actually about building relationships. I think one of the things you have to do if you're single and childless, and maybe if you're coupled and childless as well, but it's more acute if you're single, you really have to invest time and money in building relationships and making decisions for your future. We do not have the luxury of being in denial about the aging process. People without children are 25% more likely to go into an aged care facility than someone with children, and a lower level of dependency. So they could have still been living at home, but it's because they didn't have that support in their home, in their community. So in a way, it's about building relationships with other childless people and within your community as actually an investment in your future. It's not an optional nice to have. You have to get really focused around, okay, I need to put down roots and I need to build community, because these people are going to be my lifeline in 20 years' time.
I love that. These people are going to be my lifeline in 20 years' time. And I really liked how you focused on putting down roots and focusing and people within their local community, and just building that network and that friendship, and really investing in that, because you mentioned this a little bit earlier, Jody, but women who are childless and on their own, single, can just literally work hammer and tong, and then not be making any effort to, you know, hang out with that younger person that's 20 years younger that could just teach them more or give them more support or
Yeah, a lot of childless women I know do tip over into workaholism, particularly if they're single, because it's a place to put our identity. But when we're, you know, it's like, well, I'm not a mother, but I do this. And, you know, no one ever gives you a hard time for kind of, you know, working too hard. And it's like, oh, she's amazing. She's doing this and she's working so hard. Well, if you put all of your life energy into there, that means you don't have much left over. And as you get older, I hate to break it to those of you who are younger, but, you know, I'm in my mid 50s. I have considerably less kind of psychic energy to burn. You know, insomnia destroyed my sleep. You know, the menopause destroyed my sleep. You know, I have to be quite thoughtful about where I spend my energy. I don't have this limitless top-up supply that just kind of re-arrives every day like I did when I was younger. And if all of that goes into work, then you don't have the energy for building the relationships, for kind of getting involved in a local community garden project and meeting a really diverse range of people. Not everyone you meet has to be childless. It's nice if a few of them are because they get it. But, you know, it's great to invest time in building relationships locally and kind of improve your relationship building skills, because happy old people are usually ones who are they're good at change, they're good at making new friends. You know, if you don't, you know, we need to think about, okay, what kind of skills do I need to make it easier for me and easier for others to help me when I'm older? How do I accept care and support and not be so damned independent all the time? You know, there's some shifts, some internal work we need to do, as well as thinking about where are the people in my local community and how can I get to know them?
Oh, you are just incredible what you're sharing here, Jody. And with your book, diving now into the book, Conscious of Your Time, and Aware of the Time, what inspired you to write your book?
It was the book I needed to read, and it didn't exist. And it arose out of the work I've been doing, the workshops I'd created, the conversations I'd had in community. And, you know, the third edition, this one, you can find it on Booktopia.
Yes, it's
like
incredible. I'll put the link.
Yeah, there's a big chapter 12 is all around aging without children as well, if you wanted to sort of dive into my thoughts on that. And it's full of references and full of resources. And I'm working on a new novel, my first novel, which is about an accidentally kick-ass single childless middle-aged woman. My dream is that Jennifer Aniston's film company will option it. It's a kind of a social comedy. And then my next book, my next non-fiction book after that, will be all around the journey into being a conscious childless elder, which is work that it's very deep, powerful work. I really would love to see more and more childless women stepping into their role as elders. I think we have those who've been through a big grief journey, who've been to hell and have come back. We have wisdom, you know, and our society needs more wise elders to support the young people and everyone through the extraordinary transition in our civilization we're going through. We need childless elders.
I love that. We need childless elders, and congratulations on all of your book success and that movie, Jennifer Aniston. That sounds incredible too. And
well, when you, Jennifer, please.
I know. I was just
draft of the novel.
I was just thinking, you know, when you talked about childless women, I was only just thinking then it arose about with my auntie, but she had a child, one, and sadly her child died, took her own life.
So
and
sad.
so she found herself, I think that wasn't planned, but she's now found herself in her 50s with no child. So when you talk about childless, there's just so many variables, isn't there?
Absolutely.
It's just like you mentioned it with all the different groups, but there is just so many different reasons, and when you so there's so many people for so different reasons. And I think sometimes we can think if a person hasn't had a child, it's because they didn't want one.
Didn't want, couldn't have. Yeah.
And it's a sort of like, yeah. What would you like to see more of, Jody, in media? Like if someone was tuning in today and maybe they're a brand owner, maybe they're a magazine editor, or they're in media, or they're in politics,
I would like there to be a real wake-up call as to the demographic shift that's happened in our society, and how many childless people there are, and how many single childless women and single childless men there are, and definitely a shake-up around the social care system. But we are part of the story of what it means to be a 21st century woman. And I would like women's magazines and the media and politicians to include us in their thinking. Every policy, every issue of a magazine they create, think about, does this include the demographic of childless and single and childless women as well? And you'll find that most magazines, most TV programs, most political policies completely neglect us. And every policy around aging should also work for those who are aging without children. We need to look at everything through this lens.
I love that. Look at everything through these lens. You're so right. It's so important. So for every woman or man out there who's childless during a pandemic, we would love for you to connect with Jody Day at Gateway Women, and we'll give out a plug again for the men's group, because there's so many men. Like I've met a lot of men. Even my youngest brother hasn't met the one, and time is passing. And sometimes it's just timing, but there are a lot of men out there too that haven't met the one. And
they struggle with the myth,
yeah,
the myth of male fertility, that a man can keep having babies for as long as his life. It's not true. Male fertility declines as well. It declines slightly later than female fertility, but one of the reasons for so many miscarriages in women in their 40s is their partner's sperm, because the chromosomal quality of the sperm degrades. A lot of men in their 50s would not be able to have a baby. And it comes as a terrible shock to them. Their wife is having or their partner is having repeated miscarriages. Male fertility declines too. Men need to know this, so that perhaps then they would commit to having a family younger.
Yes. That's good. That's good advice, because from what I hear, I've been hearing that people are getting married later in life and looking at having children later in life. And as we know, you, Jody, and myself talking from experience, if you leave everything to even your 30s and something goes pear-shaped, because I just say if life goes pear-shaped, the years fly by. So, Jody, I could talk to you forever about what you've achieved, created, your passion. I just think it's incredible how you're just bringing all of these women right around the globe. And in Australia, you've got an online course coming up.
The Reignite Weekend, which is our signature healing weekend for involuntary childless women. The first one is on the 6th and 7th of March. And then we have them again in April and later in the year. And you can find details for that on the Gateway Women website.
And Jody, before we say goodbye, if someone was really grieving, like, I've missed the boat, shit, I'm in my early 40s, I didn't get married or have kids in my 30s or 20s, it didn't work out, this is it, boom, obviously you've got your book there, which can help, but do you have any specific courses or anything extra that they should do if they were grieving?
The Reignite Weekend is specifically designed for that experience. My book, as you say, is designed for it. Within the Gateway Women online community, we have a massive amount of support around exactly this. But I also would like to say to that woman who is listening, you know, your heart is broken. It's real. Take very good care of it. Don't listen to anyone who says to you, you just need to kind of get over this or pull yourself out of this, or why don't you adopt, or have you thought of having one on your own? You know your own heart. It is broken. Treat it with great, great tenderness.
Thank you, Jody. That's beautiful words of wisdom. So I'll say goodbye to you. I could have just talked, like this show just went so quick. I could have seriously talked to you for hours and hours on this topic because it's sort of, there's so many elements. But thank you again, Jody Day, for everything you do, have created. I'm just so grateful that you started that first blog.
Yeah. Thank you. Yvette. Thank you for being so open about your story, which I know will help so many people to feel less alone with theirs. I've absolutely loved speaking with you.
Oh, thank you. I think, yeah, I'm grateful I've shared that. Many people just think, oh, she's a bit weird. She's single. And why is she single and not got kids? Like, she's so career focused. And I was like, if only. But yeah, no, it's just sometimes life goes pear-shaped and it doesn't go to plan. And then you just have to start over again and get on with it and be positive and optimistic. And I'm grateful now because we're both here today. And if I had kids, there's no way I'd probably be doing this. No way. I wouldn't have time. Every mother I've spoken to says they never have time for anything else other than the kids. So on that note, to every woman who's tuning in, I hope, even if you do have kids, I hope it's given you an insight to just how women are feeling or what they're going through during the pandemic. And I really wanted to talk about that because there's a lot of women in the SPAITGIRL community and part of the podcast show that are feeling alone. But now you don't need to be. You can join Gateway Women and continue to follow Jody Day on her website. Now, Jody, your website is gateway-women.com.
If you get it wrong and you just put gatewaywomen.com, it will get there as well.
Oh, beautiful. Well, we'll say thank you so much, Jody. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm sure I'll have you on the podcast show again when your next book comes out. But in the meantime, thank you for sharing your story, words of wisdom, and thoughts to help others feel good from within. We'll say goodbye to Jody Day. And thank you for tuning into the SPAITGIRL Talk Show podcast. Be sure to share this episode with those you love to raise awareness. And make sure you subscribe, leave a 5-star rating and review. And together, let's feel good from within. Bye for now. Bye.
Bye.